Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it rain. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Tonight, we're gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it rain.
Ember. Oh, Ember.
Miss Ember.
Oh, great, Ember. Tell me what I'm doing.
Appreciate you, Ember.
Love Ember. She's great.
Bottom of the barrel Ember bullshit.
Oh my God, Ember.
Ember. Ember.
Ember.
We love you, Ember.
You rock at that, Ember.
Ember is the queen.
We're neighbors, Ember.
I see you, Ember.
Hey, Ember is hot.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. If you're watching live, if you're watching in the future, happy whatever time it happens to be for you. And also, hit the subscribe button, because if you're watching in the future, it means you're not watching live because you're not getting notifications. And if you'd like notifications, so you can join us here in the live chat with this side, with all these lovely people, make sure you have the subscribe button pressed, you have the bell rung, you have all the other doodads and what's this clicked and connected and so forth, because, you know, time is fleeting. And that's sort of what we're talking about today, is how the way we measure time shapes our understanding of history. I expect it's going to be a very fascinating and enlightening topic. However, first, as is often the case, I have notes. First of all, time was short this morning, and I don't think I quite got this earring in right. It's probably fine. Time limits all of us in all our behaviors and all the things we do. And one of the results of time being limited is occasionally we don't fully think through all of our options in a given situation. I found out this morning that our friend Wes from over at Skeptic Haven produced a video with a whole bunch of guests about the Kalam cosmological argument. and he somehow managed to forget about all the women who know about cosmology and astrophysics, and all the POC people who know about cosmology and astrophysics. Even some of us who spent years working on things directly related to exactly that problem. Now, no shade on Wes. You're going to call the people that you think of first. It's just unfortunate that the people who came to mind all happen to be white dudes. That doesn't mean what they have to say is wrong. It doesn't mean what they have to say is incorrect. In fact, some of them I know are very capable intellectual figures. Some of them I don't know, I have to admit. It's just the fuck. Now, again, no shade on Wes. That's just a thing that we all need to be aware of, is when we rush, we tend to make mistakes and we don't fully think through all of our options, you know? Time be like that. Now, perhaps Wes didn't ask me because I tend to shoot down the Kalam in seconds. The Kalam, for anybody who doesn't know, is William Lane Craig's formulation of an older argument of how did the universe get here? And it goes like this. Anything, Craig's version goes like this. Anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Yada, yada, hand waving, therefore God. That's Craig's take. So my response, my takedown is premise one, anything that begins to exist has a cause. Bang, that's it right there. That's a problem. Nothing that begins to exist has one cause. Not one thing we have ever seen in this universe has a single cause. So how could the universe have a single cause? Now, philosophically speaking, we can't rule out the possibility that since what's true of things within the universe doesn't necessarily hold for what's true for the universe itself. And that's fair enough. But we don't have any reason to believe that something that exists outside of space and time and causality could cause anything to happen. That's a bit more of a reach than suggesting, well, you can't say for sure outside of the universe that it wasn't a single cause. So that's just my take. Thank you all so much for joining. Yeah. History, time, adventure. Let's do the thing. So what have we got? Starting us off with this lovely clock looking thing. What is it? It says it's a, I can't even read the damn thing. It's from Getty Images, a draw state effect background based on, oh, it's based on the Prague Royal clock. Okay, it does look somewhat similar, perhaps. I don't know. I've never been to Prague, and more's the pity. So how does measuring time shape history? Well, let's get into it. From Neolithic constructions to atomic clocks, how humans measure time reveals what we value most. And that's what I really wanted to get into, is the way we determine how we think about time. It shapes how we understand our own history and the history of other cultures. But also, the way we divide up time, it reveals some underlying values. It gives us a sense of architecture to how we design our day and our week and our month and our year and our lives. And there's a language to it. There's an expression of what's most important and what's expendable. And it shows a lot about the kind of people we are into, what we hold as most sacred, I suppose. Because that's what time is about, right? Like what really matters. Because no matter how much of it we get, it's always limited. So this article is from Scientific American, which pluses and minuses. We do have some other stuff to look at, but I wanted to start here partly because of that, the way it sets the ground with it demonstrating how we view time shows what we value, at least to some extent. So humans, the article says, have tracked time in one way or another in every civilization we have records of, writes physicist Chad Orzel in his new book, A Brief History of Timekeeping, from Benabella Books, 2022. Orzel chronicles Neolithic efforts to predict solstices and other astronomical events, the latest atomic clocks that keep time to ever more precise decimals, and everything that came in between. He describes the evolution of clocks from water clocks that timed intervals by how long it took water to flow out of a container to hourglasses filled with sand to the first mechanical and pendulum clocks to our modern era. Each episode is filled with interesting physics and engineering, as well as a glimpse at how different ways of timekeeping affected how people lived their lives at various points and places in history. Now, there's a whole lot that goes into this. People have kept time in a whole bunch of different ways over the ages. The ancient ancients, like prehistoric ancients, told time by looking at the sun. And even on a cloudy day when the sun wasn't visible, you had a pretty good sense of what time it was based on the last time you saw the sun plus your internal clock if you practice at it. It's a trick I used to do when I was a kid. As many of you know, I'd wander around in the woods most summers because there's not a lot to do on a farm during the summers. The plants are just growing. I could usually pinpoint what time it was to within a 5-minute window just by glancing at the sun and knowing which way was south, you know? It's a skill that you can practice, you can get good at. You got to maintain it, but c'est la vie. Water clocks were an ancient mechanism based on the very simple principle that water drops are the same size, depending on the size of the hole. So the water will fall through when it reaches a certain drop size that gravity takes over and pulls it away from the hole. So you can measure time that way. Now, there's pluses and minuses to the accuracy, not so much because of the water, but because of evaporation. If you've got, say, a glass that you're filling up with different markers for different hours on a very hot, dry day, it'll take longer for that water to fill up to the 6 or 7 hour mark than on a, cooler, more humid day because the water's evaporating out of your hourglass. There's pluses and minuses with every other mechanism of timekeeping, but some things are a bit more precise than others. Another popular one, of course, over long ago was, the name eludes me. I've got a tip of the tongue-ism about it. Sundial, basically. There's a special name for it, but sundial. Of course, those only work on sunny days. And they have to be, tuned to the specific day of the year, and they have to be calibrated, and it's a bit of a pain to use them properly. But when handled correctly and under the right conditions, they can be quite precise. So everything's got its pluses and minuses. Oh, I should have marked my place. I am bad at this. It's all good. Water clocks, intervals, hourglasses, each episode is filled with interesting physics and engineering, as well as a glimpse at how different ways of keeping time affected how people live their lives at various points and places in history. Oh, I love that there's an ad for the solar eclipse. Now, this is going to be an annular eclipse, which I believe, they're going to the Mediterranean, so I guess it'll be in the Mediterranean in middle of August next year. Yeah, lots of cool stuff. If you've never seen an annular eclipse, words are just falling out of my head today. I just said the word and I still had a hard time reaching for it. Annular eclipses are not the same as totality. Totality is a very, very unique experience. It's absolutely cool, but annular eclipses should not be missed because it's not every day that the sun gets mostly dark, but not completely, and there's a ring of fire in the sky. You see the image of it, but it's just not the same. You know what? I'm talking about irrelevant things to our topic today. It's fine. So Scientific American talked to Orzel about the coolest clocks in history, the most complicated calendar systems, and why we still need to improve the best clocks of today. An edited transcript of the interview follows. Oh, goody. We're reading an It's a little meta. It's fine. How did the advent of clocks change history? Well, there's an interesting fucking hell, Ember. Why can't I talk? Did fairies come in the night and steal my ability to enunciate, to verbalize, to sprechen the English? Like, what the fuck is going on? Clearly I need more coffee. That's the issue. There's an interesting democratization of time as you go along. The very most ancient monuments are things such as Newgrange in Ireland. It's this massive artificial hill with a passage through the center. Once a year, sunlight reaches that central chamber, and that tells you it's the winter solstice. I've been there before, and you can put 10 to 12 people in there, maybe. This is an entire thing where only a few people have access to this information. As you start to get things such as water clocks, that's something that individual people can use to time things. They're not super accurate, but that makes it more accessible. I'm a little ishy about this because they're not the same thing, right? The winter solstice is a once a year thing. Water clocks are what time is it during the day thing. It's different, but there is something of a democratization to be posed, because in the old days, water clocks were expensive. Clockwork clocks were stupid expensive. That's why royals would show off giant clockwork clocks, like the Prague clock, for instance. But also people weren't really ruled by clocks the same way as they are today, where, if you're 2 minutes late, you get written up at work. Or if you're supposed to call somebody at 6 p.m. and you don't do it by 6:05, they decide you're not gonna, and they go to the grocery store or whatever, the way we try to measure time down to that infinite level of precision, that's a new thing. And it's not just because we have the ability to be more precise now that all our clocks are synchronized and national atomic clocks and whatnot. It's the railroads, actually. We didn't even really bother with time zones before the railroads. If the sun was up there, it was noon-ish, morning, evening, afternoon. Technically, numbered hours did exist, but we didn't really use them because they weren't really relevant. If you wanted to make an appointment with somebody, it would be stop by this afternoon. And if you happen to show up at the same time as a bunch of other people, somebody'd have to wait. We still do that in doctors' offices, even with our ability to make time much more precise. We say, oh, you have an appointment at 6:13 p.m. And you get there and there's 20 people waiting in line. That's what the precision doesn't help. People end up waiting. If there's too many people to see one person, people end up waiting. This is what we've always done. But most of our society was, broadly speaking, agricultural. It didn't really matter if you fed the chickens right at 5 a.m. They could wait till 5:30. It didn't make a difference. They could wait till 7:30, frankly, because they're chickens. They don't care. They can't read a clock. So unlike that, in industrial situations, it also didn't matter that much, because before the unions gave us the 8-hour workday, you just worked all day. Like, the factory would blow a whistle and that meant it was time to go into work. And whenever you got there is when you got there. If you didn't come in a reasonable amount of time, given how far you had to walk or take a taxi or something along those lines. Another fun thing they had in old New York was buses. They had horse-driven buses. I digress. The point is, they'd blow the whistle, it's time to come in. You come in, you work, they blow the whistle, you go home to lunch. It wasn't that serious. Nobody was really timekeeping. It was just you worked there all day. Shrug. So mechanical clocks make it even better. And then you get public clocks. Clocks on church towers with bells that rang out the hours. Now everyone is subject to the tyranny of time. That was another thing that they used to do in old New York City, is there was, I believe I want to say it was in Times Square, but Times Square is named that because the newspaper was there. It may have been a different, I seem to recall it was somewhere near Fifth Avenue. It's not super important. There was a place in Lower Manhattan where at noon every day, all the men would show up, pull out their pocket watches, wind the springs, and then wait. And then an event would happen. And I forget if it was like a certain bell rung or a certain whistle went off. It's fuzzy in my head. But that signaled noon, official noon. And all the men would set their watches to noon based on that. And they do it every day because their watches weren't very good. So you had to resynchronize every day. It was quite the scene. So everybody starts to have access to time. Mechanical watches start to become reasonably accurate and reasonably cheap in the 1890s. They cost about 1 day's wages, which not exactly cheap, but c'est la vie. Suddenly everybody had access to accurate timekeeping all the time. And that's a really interesting change. Now, it's not everybody. A day's wages for whom? Whose day's wage? Because there's a big difference in days' wages even in the 1890s, between the CEOs, the financiers on Wall Street, the gentlemen about town, and the paupers who were farming. Because there were still farms in Manhattan in the 1890s. Above Fifth Avenue, there was one building, and everything else was farms. So, is it hard to track the advent of different kinds of clocks? Now, this is a thing that bugs me. As many of you know, physicists get hung up on clocks, and there's a reason for that. It's because when we're going through our bachelor's and our master's programs, there's a lot that centers on Einstein, his relativity, his formulas, and so forth. And Einstein used clocks a lot in his thought experiments because you could use them to illustrate some of the oddities of reference frames under extreme circumstances. Like, for example, many people have heard the old adage that if you're moving at the speed of light, time stops. Time slows down as you approach it, and time stops when you reach it. And the reason being, if you leave Earth looking at the face of Big Ben, and somehow you have the magnification that you can always keep Big Ben's face in sight, as you go faster and faster and faster away from Earth, it takes the light longer and longer and longer to catch up. And so the face of the clock seems to fall further and further behind. And when you reach the speed of light, the light from the face of the clock is traveling at the same speed you are. And so whatever time you're seeing, that's the only time you'll ever see. Now, of course, there's a huge problem with this thought experiment. That only makes sense if you're looking backward. What happens if you're looking in any other direction? Well, things get even more interesting. For one thing, we don't actually have math to describe what happens if you're looking straight ahead. But if you're looking at various directions off to the sides, you get an interesting distortion effect where things that are ahead of you but slightly off, even 1 degree off from directly ahead, will appear to be behind you because you're moving so fast. There's such a distortion in space that the majority of apparent space doesn't exist. It's all compressed into the rear hemisphere of your light cone. And that's really weird. The point is, the clocks, the physicists get hung up on clocks, and I suspect this particular historian does too. We mustn't let the mechanism we're using to help illustrate a model distract us from the model. It's not about the clocks. Likewise, timekeeping, clocks are tools, but they're not the thing itself. When people write about clocks in history, they use the same word for a bunch of different things. There's a famous example. There was a fire in a particular monastery, and the record says some of the brothers ran to the well, and some ran to the clock. That tells you that it was a water clock because they're going to fill up their buckets to put out the fire. or that it was a mechanical clock and it was the most valuable item in the monastery and they needed to save it. Depending on the water clock, some of them have very, very big water tanks because they don't necessarily have to go by drops. They can go by flow rate, which will change depending on how much water is still above them, because gravity pulls down on more water harder than less. It's not important. It's a pressure thing. If there's a whole lot of water in the clock, like how big is this fire? You'd need a crazy amount of water in your clock to fight a fire with it. I don't know. Anyway, John Hudson says, I appreciate the way Dali uses clocks. The artist who made the melty clocks. We love the melty clock. Well, they're mostly like grandfather clocks and stopwatches, or not stopwatches, pocket watches. I mean, maybe they're stopwatches. I don't know, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Right. So yeah, it could be a water clock, maybe. But there's another reference that says a clock was installed above the rood screen of a church. If it's 50 feet up in the air, that was probably not a water clock, but a mechanical clock, because nobody would make a device where you have to go up there and fill it with water. But see, I don't like this because there's so many assumptions. Mechanical clocks are heavy and they have to be wound. Nobody would want to go up there and wind it either. Now, maybe the springs are down on the ground and it uses pulleys or something. Who knows? But you don't have to carry buckets of water to refill a water clock. We've known since the times of the ancient Greeks, there are ways to pump water up. Holy crap. Honestly, I think a water clock, it'd be heavy as hell, but it'd be considerably easier to fill than to wind a mechanical clock. You know, you can have a cistern at the bottom of your abbey, and you can have an Archimedes screw working as a kind of mechanical pump, and you can just have somebody basically do the equivalent of pedaling a bicycle for a few hours, and it'll run the water right up there. You don't even have to do it all at once. Silly people. All right, what's your favorite clock from history? And the author fella says, I really like this Chinese tower clock. I wonder if it has, if it'll link us to an image. I wonder. It does not. It goes to an ad for Revolution watches, whatever that means. It was built in AD 1100 CE. You'd think a person obsessed with history and clocks would get the fucking calendar right in 2022, but never mind. By a court official, Su Sung, it's a water clock based on a constant flow of water, but it's a mechanical device. It's this giant wheel that has buckets at the end of arms, and the bucket is positioned under the constant flow water source. When it fills past a certain point, the bucket tips, and that releases a mechanism that lets the wheel rotate. The wheel turns and brings a new bucket that starts filling. The timing regulation is really provided by the water, which also provides the drive force. The weight of the water is what's turning the wheel. It's this weird hybrid between an old school water clock and a mechanical clocks that would be developed in Europe a century or two later. It's an amazingly intricate system, a monumental thing that worked incredibly well, but it didn't last long. It ran for about 20 years. It's located in the capital city of a particular dynasty, which fell, and the successors couldn't make it work. They couldn't figure it out. Now that's a thing that's been happening, and it's one of the things that drives history after a fashion, is that the rise and fall of different technologies over time. For example, there were Chinese physicists, I guess, for lack of a better term, somewhere around the year 800 who came up with a water clock. And it gradually made its way across the trade routes until it came to Europe. And by the time Marco Polo had it and brought it back around to China to present the emperor with this amazing European technology, the Chinese had not only lost the technology, but forgotten that they ever had it. It was just a straight up derivative of what the Chinese had had a few centuries before. And yet they were impressed when Marco Polo brought it, because nobody there was aware that such a thing was even possible, even though it was originally their own technology. History be weird, yo. So it's a neat episode in history. The origin of this is that Susong was sent to offer greetings on the winter solstice to a neighboring kingdom, but the calendar was off by a day. He was late. He got there and he gave his greeting on the wrong day, which would have been a huge embarrassment. When he got back, the calendar makers were punished, and he said, "I'm fixing this." So he wasn't having it. He was like, we need accurate timekeeping. This is diplomatical foppery. We cannot have. Goodness. So how does the society's way of keeping time reveal what it values? Now we get to the real questions. Every civilization that we have decent records of has its own way of keeping time. It's very interesting because there are all these different approaches. None of the natural cycles you see are commensurate with one another. That's important because we do see cycles in the natural world. We see the year, right? The changing of the seasons, but we also see the moon going through its phases, 28-ish days. But the moon doesn't line up neatly with the year. In fact, it doesn't line up neatly with a month. So, and then we've got the different bits within the year, the equinoxes and the solstices. Those are great for more accurate timekeeping of the year rather than when it snows, when it stops snowing. But you have to be able to measure pretty precisely the sun's southernmost movement, the sun's northernmost movement, which day has exactly 12 hours, light and dark, things like this. It can be complicated, but there's other things too. Like, the breeding cycles of animals, the cycles of the tides. There's so many cycles and none of them fucking line up. So which one do you pick as your timekeeping device? A year is not an integer number of days, and it's not an integer number of cycles of the moon. That is to say, there's fractions, there's leftovers. So you have to decide what you're prioritizing over what else. You have systems such as the Islamic calendar, which is strictly lunar. They end up with a calendar that is 12 lunar months, which is short compared with about 365 days in a solar year. So the dates of holidays move relative to the seasons. The Jewish calendar is doing complicated things because they want to keep both. They want holidays to be associated with seasons, so they have to fall in the right part of the year, but they also want them in the right phase of the moon. It gets complicated. The Gregorian calendar splits the difference. They have months I don't know that the Gregorian calendar was formulated by trying to strike a balance between the Hebrew calendar and the Islamic calendar, but whatever. We have months whose lengths are short based on the moon, but we fix the months. Well, that's not true. We have 30 and 31 day months. They're long. They go more than the moon. That's why blue moons are possible. But never mind. We fix the month. So the solstices are always going to be on June 20, 21st, 22nd. That's not fixed. That's still quite some wiggle room. Now the solstice is almost always on June 21st. But the equinoxes, especially the autumnal equinox, moves. Holy shit. Anyway, the fact that it moves shows that it's not strictly fixed, because we haven't done our math quite precisely enough, but never mind. We give the position of the year relative to the seasons priority above everything else. Well, not strictly speaking, but never mind. Then you have the Maya doing something completely differently. Those Maya, they're always off doing their own thing. Their calendar involves this 260-day interval, and no one is completely sure why 260 days was so important. Is it 260 days? I kind of want to fact check that. Damn it, I can't type as well as I can speak. Was the Mayan year 260 days? Okay. The Mayan calendar consists of several cycles or counts of different lengths. The 260-day count is known to scholars as the Tzolk'in, which combined with a 365-day solar year known as the Ha'ab to form a synchronized cycle lasting 52 what we would call years, which became the calendar round. So why a 260-day cycle? Interesting. Every 260 days, the Aquajab, the highland areas of Guatemala, celebrate a New Year ceremony called the name I can't pronounce. So it's okay. It's still being used, but why is it there? Incidentally, it's worth noting that the Mayans are not exactly extinct in what country is this? I can't it's not important. I'm looking at too many things at once. Anyway, possibly Guatemala, possibly Honduras. The article isn't quite clear. There's 7 million people who are Mayan and still practicing Mayan traditions today. 7 million people. Never mind. Not important. 260-day cycle. Sacred calendar. Why is the calendar cycle every 52 years? Well, that we know because it's the coincidence of the 260-day cycle and the 365-day cycle. They line up every 52 years. But why? Okay, I'm not finding a solid answer, and I don't really want to dig into it all day here. That could take a minute. Deviant says we get 365.25 days a year from Egypt, but you might learn more about that on the 19th. And that leads to another interesting point that some of you may be more fascinated with. I did manage to successfully schedule out next week, and we have goodies coming up. We have wonderment in store for y'all. Let me pull up the thing and I will show you. So let's go to the lives page. We'll share this tab. This is, of course, the channel. On the lives tab, it starts with today and goes forward. So here we are, about time. We're live now. In the future, we're going to talk about curiosity tomorrow, member stream tomorrow evening. So, join memberships if you want to come play and participate in that. Thursday, Drake equation, bonus show that may show up on Thursday, but it may happen earlier. I'm likely to do a different bonus show if I get the opportunity today, because I have something on my mind I really want to talk about. Friday, chemistry. How did we get chemistry? Also Friday evening, bonus show. Dr. Ben and some of the Job and Jugs girls are going to be joining me to study a woman's Bible study class. But that's not what I'm talking about. Getting to next week's Learn Together Live. I mean, there's more stuff, obviously. Placeholder for Job and Jugs, debate review with Mark. But Monday, ancient technology, Egyptian technology for that matter. And you may notice this little critter poking her head up over the pyramids bears a striking resemblance to our own Deviant Outcast. So yeah, we're having Deviant back on the 19th. Tuesday, Christian identity. It occurred to me that a lot of people get worked up. And Lil actually somewhat suggested this by mentioning it in a way that caught my attention. There is a white supremacist group akin to the KKK who call themselves Christian identity. So when you say Christian identity is white supremacist, that is factually correct. It's in reference to this specific group, which is associated with the New Apostolic Reformation, the Seven Mountains Mandate, nationalist Christians. We're going to learn about them and hopefully piss off a bunch of people who know nothing about their own religion. It'll be fun. And then we're going to piss off more people talking about fake conservatives, because the conservatives we have today are not conservatives, not even remotely close. And we're going to get into why. So that should be fun. Then we're going to get back into the dim and misty bits of history. That almost rhymes. It's so close. Cataclysm. Did you know that the world ended already? It did in 536. We're going to talk about that too. And then finally, planets. Space is big. It's true. But every now and then, over billions of years, these big ass balls of rock run into each other. We're going to talk about that too. So that's next week. That'll be a bunch of fun. I hope you join us. Some of them are going to be less fun than others, more provocative, but it should still be entertaining at the very least. Yeah. So, right. I hate it when people say no one is sure. Like, when a person says that, it means they don't know. And they're just asserting that no one knows, because if they don't know, then clearly no one knows. No one could know something they don't know. And that drives me crazy. It's a thing that has been bugging me since elementary school. First or second grade, teachers started saying, oh, well, you know, the moon is locked in orbit facing the Earth, and no one knows why. And me, as a child in the class, knew why. You know, I'm like, you can't say no one knows unless you know that nobody knows, you know? Like, it's awfully embarrassing if you say no one knows and there's someone literally right there who knows, you know? But who knows? Nobody knows why people do that. It's a weird quirk of language, but it bugs the fuck out of me. So the official time is now based on cesium. Yeah, cesium. There's a reason. It's cesium atoms are much bigger than like hydrogen and helium and shit. Easier to keep track of. Anyway, 1 second is 9,192,631,770 oscillations of the light emitted as cesium moves between two particular states. That's a lot of oscillations, and it takes some pretty advanced machinery to keep track of that shit. I can't believe you know that off the top of your head. I've taught this a bunch of times. The author says. I mean, I don't know it off the top of my head. I just read it just now. It's right there. I just read it. It's a neat trick. Time is defined in terms of cesium atoms. Well, it can be. Specific measurements of time can be defined that way because we chose to define it that way. So the best clocks in the world are cesium clocks because we've based our current model of time on the oscillations of cesium. Cesium clocks are good to 1 part in 10 to the 16th. If it says 1 second, there are 15 zeros after that decimal point before you get to the first uncertain digit. They're experimental clocks that are 2, maybe 3 orders of magnitude better than that. But those are not officially clocks. They're measuring a frequency and measuring it to a better precision than the best cesium clocks. Those are good enough that an aluminum ion clock did a test of relativity. Researchers held an ion fixed in one and then in another one, and presumably identical, they shook back and forth to show that the one moving ticked a little slower. Then they held one in one position and moved one about a foot higher, and they could see that the one at the higher altitude ticked faster. They agreed perfectly with relativity. You may be familiar with an older test of relativity that ran in a similar fashion. We took old atomic clocks, probably cesium ones, and we kept one on the ground and put one on an airplane, and we sent it around the world. And the one on the airplane was at a higher altitude and moving. And when it came back, more time. Moving slows you down. Higher altitude speeds you up. So I've got the two things mixed together. The movement overrides the altitude if you're moving fast enough, because the altitude difference from the surface of the Earth to a low altitude aircraft, not that big a difference. The movement makes much more difference. But if you put one clock at the bottom of a tower and another at the top of a tower, you get a difference. The one higher up ticks faster. And we see this in our GPS satellites. We have to account for the fact that time is literally running faster for those satellites than it is here on Earth. The reason being, we're constantly under acceleration due to gravity's influence. It's not a pull per se, it's an acceleration. We're being sped up, and we're held in place because we can't move through the solid floors. So that's why we fall. If there's no floor in the way, you get accelerated and down you go. That acceleration slows time because you can only move so fast through space-time as a totality. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. And because we're being accelerated, we have that constant force. That's what force is, really, is acceleration in a certain direction. So it slows down our passage of time. The less gravity we're under, the further we're out of the gravity well, the less acceleration and the less it slows down the passage of time. If you could get to an area that's absolutely gravitationally flat, that would be as fast as time goes. That would be as close to a cosmic zero for time with no modifiers as you can get. But I don't know that such a place is possible because everywhere in the universe, there's mass somewhere, and so there's gravity. So the best you could probably hope for is finding a place where the gravity exactly balances all the way around, so there isn't a disturbance. You're not going to get zero gravity, but you can get exactly balanced gravity, theoretically. But I digress. The point is, the more precise a clock you can make, the faster, the easier it is to do these tests, like just holding one above another, and you can register a different amount of oscillations or whatever it is that they're measuring. So it's pretty interesting. But does that show that a high degree of precision is what we value? What are we trying to achieve? Is it atoms that we value? Is it better technology that we value? Like, what is it that we're valuing by pursuing these ever more precise atom-based clocks, you know? And it's something to consider as we take ourselves a short break to, I should have done this with the water clocks. I'm so off today, guys. I am sorry. Water clocks need water, and if you need water, ta-da! Hey, folks. I've been working hard on my health, and so far I've lost over 140 pounds. A huge part of good health is hydration. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with Epic Water Filters. Check this out. Not only can you say goodbye to expensive bottled water, but these filters are made in the US, so no tariffs, and they're made to fit your life. From these lovely pitchers I can fill from, to sink units, to portable filters that fit in your reusable bottle. With Epic, I can refill from nature's water sources and not have to worry about bacteria and whatnot. But also, send back a used filter to be responsibly recycled, and they'll send you a free replacement, saving you and the earth even more. Want to save a ton of money, be healthier, and build a better world? Head to epicwaterfilters.com and enter code EMBER15 at checkout for 15% off. Don't settle for random water. Upgrade to Epic. Oh, my poor brain is just not on it today. Let's get a little bigger though. We can. Oh, that's too much. That's too much. I don't know if I like that. How about this? Maybe this. Let's go with this for a minute. Possibly. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just being so tiny. It's oh, now I can't change it back. Whatever. It's fine. We'll just go ahead. Okay. Is there a limit to how accurate clocks can ever be? There's a limit in the sense that there are a lot of things that affect the precision. Einstein's general relativity tells you that the closer you are to a large mass, the slower your clock will tick. At some point, you're sensitive to the gravitational attraction of graduate students coming into and out of a lab. At that point, it becomes impractical. This is already an issue because the atomic time for the world is a consensus of atomic clocks all over the world. Here in the US, there are two big standard labs. One is the Naval Observatory in Washington, around sea level, and the other is in Boulder, Colorado, about a mile up. Their cesium clocks tick at different rates because they're different distances from the center of the Earth. They have to take that into account. So we kind of make an unwise choice in locating this clock in Boulder. After all you know about clocks, I have to ask what kind of watch you wear. Oh, who the hell still wears a watch? My goodness. I get it. Some people do, but whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'll get one someday just for like extra bracelet capability or so. I don't know. We'll see. it just seems inefficient to me, to keep a separate device that redundantly does something what your existing devices all do innately. Like it's built, whatever. Okay. He says, I have two. One is a quartz watch, nothing special. I've probably spent more replacing the band on it several times than I spent on the watch. The other I have is a mechanical watch from the 1960s. It's an Omega, purely mechanical watch. It's incredibly intricate, a marvel of engineering, but I can go to a dollar store and buy a watch that can keep time just as well because quartz is so accurate. Quartz watches, of course, also operate based on oscillations. You apply an electric charge to a quartz crystal because it's piezoreactive. It'll twitch at a certain speed, and if the mechanism can keep track of those twitches, it can use it to tell time, as long as you keep the electric charge going. It's pretty neat. So that doesn't tell us all that much about how it shaped history, though. For example, how the railroads, with their insistence on time zones and precise timekeeping, really reshaped how we experience our lives. That's the whole reason we have such precision in our day-to-day lives now, is because the railroads insisted on it, so they could keep the trains running on time. Interesting, isn't it? How for centuries we just, it's sometime in the early afternoon. But then an industry comes in with enough money to run metal roadways across the entire country for their own private use, and then demand everybody else start keeping time the way they do. And people did, because it wasn't a major imposition. It was just an extra stress. Most people didn't see why not. Kind of a shame. All right, switching over to this is a website called Hermla Clock, I guess. I don't know. It's a blog of some kind. And you can tell it's very professionally produced because we have to highlight the text to read the damn thing. Clocks and Culture, How Timekeeping has shaped civilizations. And this is from 2023. So timekeeping, Hermla, North America. Oh, they sell clocks. Of course. That makes sense. For a site that would do a blog entry about timekeeping's effect on history. Timekeeping has played a significant role in shaping civilization throughout history. The ability to measure and track time has allowed societies to organize their activities, coordinate with others, and make predictions about the future. From ancient civilizations to modern societies, clocks and timekeeping devices have become not only practical tools, but also cultural symbols. Status symbols in the case of watches, just like pocket watches before them, water clocks in the home, all of those things. In ancient civilizations, such as the Egyptians and Mesopotamians, timekeeping was closely tied to religious and agricultural practices. Now, there again is a distinction between timekeeping within a day and timekeeping across the year. We conceptualize time as a single thing divided into measurable chunks. That isn't how humans have always looked at it. A day was a distinct thing from a year, even though multiple days made up a year. But it's neither here nor there. The Egyptians used a water clock known as a clepsydra, maybe, to measure the passage of time. They were used to determine the start of religious ceremonies, mark the flooding of the Nile, and organize working hours for the construction of the pyramids. That sounds like a lot of legend speak, but whatever. Similarly, the Mesopotamians developed sundials and used, oh my goodness, the racism. Mesopotamians did have sundials. So did everyone else. And used them to divide the day into different periods. The regular movement of the sun allowed them to track the changing seasons and plan their agricultural activities accordingly. Oh, look, the sun's getting low. It's almost harvest time. The snows will come in the high places soon. The invention of mechanical clocks during the Middle Ages, the European invention of mechanical clocks during the Middle Ages. A few other cultures got there a little sooner. the Antikythera mechanism comes to mind, and that was even probably European or possibly Anatolian. But yeah, there's been clockwork has been a thing humans knew how to do for a very long time. It's literally just cogs. It's cogs. I mean, okay, for example, mills, right? A mill that's driven by a water wheel. You build it in a river, you've got the big old wheel, the flow of the river moves and turns the big wheel, and gears drive a shaft that the wheel drives a primary axle, and gears convert the energy from that primary axle to your shaft that runs the millstone. And there's a couple different designs of millstones, but the point is, whatever you're using, it takes the same amount of time to go around the circle of your mill, depending on the flow of the river. But throughout the course of a day, when the river is roughly constant, it's going to take the same amount of time all the time. And so you can measure time based on how this very, call it primitive clock, even though it's actually somewhat advanced as an agricultural device, works. We've always had clockwork. We just didn't always call it clocks, you know? Well, always is a bit of a reach, but it does go into prehistory. Anyhow, I do get carried away from time to time. So yeah, invention of mechanical clocks during the Middle Ages. Prior to the development of clocks, time was often measured based on the position of the sun in the sky or by the ringing of bells. How did they know what time it was to ring the bells, do you suppose? There were a bunch of different ways to tell time, and it's not just based on the position of the sun, although sometimes that was done too. There were a few royals in European history who relied on basically navigators, you know, people who could figure out their position based on the position of the sun to very precisely measure where the sun was and determine what time of day it was based on the sun's position. They would use the navigator's skill to calibrate the clocks. Kind of neat, but I digress. You had to have some mechanism for telling time to determine when it was time to ring the bell, like you see in the old movies, you know, clang, 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 it's 4 o'clock, it all's well. That's a thing that also kind of came from ships, because keeping track of time was very important on ships. In order to determine your position at sea, you had to know what time it was, where you came from. And so timekeeping, water clocks, mechanical clocks, all sorts of things. And navigators had to be good at telling what the local position of the sun was, what the time was locally. And so you'd measure ships' time in terms of bells. Many navies still do this. You're on duty at 16 bells, for example. Now, nobody ever rings 16 bells. That's just 4 p.m., but it's like a combination of the bell system and military time. We do things in a weird way here in the US. Yeah. Lilibel Trades also does things in a weird way, possibly because she's in the US. She sends us a super chat for $5. Thank you, Lil, and says, but you should ring the bells and the like and the sub and the share. Like, just click all the things, and you should. You should. It's good for you. It's objectively beneficial to your health because you learn cool things that may save your life. Now, I'm not going to say that knowing how water clocks work will save your life, but you never know. Knowledge is power, and we're just handing out power here. It's what we do. So yeah, Lil likes to measure time by lighting big black candles. That's sure. I used to keep a 7-day candle burning all the time. Most of them would last 8 or 9 days, but whatever. When it started to get low, I'd move the light over to the next candle so I could keep a flame going perpetually. I did it for a couple of years, and then I moved. And, you know, moving screws up everything. So different era, c'est la vie. Oh, goodness. But thank you, Lil. All right, where the hell was I? I've lost track of time. Haha, haha. Let's see. Invention of clocks, Middle Ages. This allowed for the standardization of time and greatly facilitated trade, travel, and communication. Kind of. It had some impact, but whatever. It also led to the establishment of fixed working hours and the concept of punctuality. Oh, that's the thing. It's a concept completely invented. Like in the way back dim and misty, if you ordered a delivery, it might be there, next week. And then a little more advanced timekeeping wise, it'll be there next Tuesday. And then a little more advanced timekeeping wise, it'll be there next Tuesday in the afternoon. And a little more advanced timekeeping wise, it'll be there next Tuesday around 4 p.m. and so on. We keep getting more and more precise, which invites the possibility of being late. It's a kind of rudeness. If you're late, you're wasting the other person's time. Now it's a possession. Now it's a property. Now it's a deadly insult to take it away from someone else. We no longer spend time with a person for the pleasure of their company. We now spend time on a person. Lil says, love you, Ember. Thank you, Lil. I appreciate you very, very much. Love you too. But also, this shows that Lil's cough medicine is working because she's gotten a little loopy. Probably not. You may have noticed from the fact that she's on the show fairly often. She has her own emoji. We are pretty close. Yeah. So yay. And also Kelly has an emoji. And also Ember has an emoji. And if you want to play with some emojis too, consider joining memberships. We're very cheap. If all you want is the emojis, you can start at the match level. It's only 99 cents a month, and you get all the cool emojis. Now, if you want more than just the emojis, we have other levels. At the low price of $2.99, you can join and get all the emojis, plus all the member-exclusive content. And there is a ton of member-exclusive content, plus access to the members-only live streams, like you're coming up, I think I said tomorrow. I don't know what the hell Past Ember has planned, but whatever the case, there's a bunch of benefits for members. Do consider joining, and it helps a lot. And also, I think you'll like it. Hopefully. That's the point. That's what we're trying for anyway. Punctuality. During the Renaissance period, clocks became a status symbol and were often adorned with elaborate designs and decorations. There we go. The clocks are the status symbol. That's what we're talking about. Clock towers became prominent landmarks in cities, symbolizing the power and influence of the ruling classes. Wink, wink. Wink, wink, wink. The famous astronomical clock in Prague's Old Town Square, Prague's Old Town Square, forgive me, I'm an American, I can't pronounce things, is an example of the cultural significance of clocks during this period. In the modern era, the invention of more precise and portable timekeeping devices, such as pocket watches and wristwatches, further revolutionized society. Well, kinda. I mean, for a long time, they were curiosities, they were novelties, they were status symbols, they were ways for people to show off, I'm better than you because I have a grandfather clock on my wrist, sort of thing. The ability to carry time around with them allowed individuals to better manage their daily activities and led to an increased efficiency in various aspects of life. Not so much, actually. Now, we didn't have proper science back in the day, but we did find that various studies, surveys, observations, and so forth, many times when people were exposed to a greater precision of temporal definition, with that increased expectation of increased efficiency, now that you're aware of time, surely you can manage it better. Everyone's always been aware of time. Now we're just distracting ourselves with its measurement. A person who's able, a baker, for example, a baker who is able to produce 100 loaves of bread a day can always produce 100 loaves of bread a day, regardless of whether if he's staring at the clock or not. Adding a clock does not improve his efficiency. Understanding that maybe the way he needs the dough could be done more efficiently, that could improve his efficiency and increase his output of loaves of bread. But the clock doesn't have anything to do with that, Like, it's not because of the clock that he can tell this other technique is faster. You know, you don't actually need a clock for that. It also had a profound impact on transportation and the ability to coordinate schedules across different time zones. And that's the key. That's why the railroads had so much power, so much say, to the extent that we now use time zones. You could go in my town, for example, it might be 12 noon, right? And I could go to the next town over, and aside from the fact that it takes me half the day to get there, they would tell me that it's 12:30, and I'd go to the next town over and they'd tell me it's 11 a.m. because it didn't matter that much, right? Like nobody's life was hanging on 15 minutes or half an hour or even an entire hour. It didn't matter. Railroads made it matter. That's the only thing that it was. The capitalism drove us to it. And in some ways, it has made the world more efficient. We can definitely get a lot more done by coordinating schedules across different time zones. But it's also added a lot of stress to our lives. Some of us have a very hard time chilling, even because we feel that constant urge to productivity that's been driven into us our whole lives, which kind of sucks. But c'est la vie. Furthermore, timekeeping has also influenced cultural practices and social expectations. The concept of being on time and the importance of punctuality are deeply ingrained in many cultures. For example, in Japan, being punctual is considered a sign of respect and is expected in professional and social settings. Note on that, while it's true respect has always been a big deal in Japan, the concept of precise time bullshit is something the Japanese got from us. We pushed it on them along with the steam power and the metal warships and all that bullshit, which led to World War II. Oops, I guess. On the other hand, some cultures have a more relaxed perception of time and may prioritize other aspects, such as enjoying the present moment. Can we just enjoy the present moment? Can we just have a moment to enjoy the moment, to be in the moment for a moment? Did you know a moment has a technical definition? Officially, it's exactly 90 seconds. It's a minute and a half. How rude to give it such an exact measurement, to put a limit on a moment, when some moments are brief and fleeting, and others could last forever. Alas, that humans should be so precise. But the good news is that with the passage of time comes new things, new opportunities, new wonders to explore, such as Dr. Kip's new video starring Maya Edkison, which premieres tomorrow. By understanding how time works, we know that it's coming out tomorrow. And Dr. Kip has helpfully gifted us a link so that we can share this moment together. I know, Ember, stop it. But it's very cool that Dr. Kip has a new video with friend of the community and often co-host on this very program, Maya Edkison. Maya's dropped in from time to time. Not that long ago, in fact. Last week, I think, Maya was over here. So yeah, we love to see Maya here and there and all about the square, as they say. But you know, time might be a conspiracy. And if you need to take a moment to savor the moment, I'm going to leave you with a conspiracy for a moment.
Are you feeling the world is leaving you behind? Do you look at all the pseudoscience, rumors, and wild speculation on the internet and wonder, why can't I do that? Well, friend, you can. We can help you. We are ConspiraWin. ConspiraWin has a long history of helping anyone with a hidden truth. We will get your message out. The conspiracy theories you see today all started out with one person's vision. The moon landing hoax was launched by a NASA engineer whose manager didn't okay his vacation request. ConspiraWin was there to help out. Christianity started out because one little girl named Mary got pregnant out of wedlock, and ConspiraWin saved the day. Now, the virgin birth is accepted Catholic doctrine. You may be thinking, but my idea of the center of the earth being made of ice is far-fetched. No one's going to believe that. In a world where people believe windmills cause cancer, we say no dream is too big. Conspirowin will take your fledgling idea and feed it to our YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok operatives. And these savvy social media professionals will raise doubts with the prevailing scientific consensus. They will say no one has ever seen the planet's core except Jesus. And science is wrong all the time. That's why science has theories and not Jesus. Within 30 days, we guarantee you CNN will run a story on how your conspiracy theory isn't true. We will also give you 100% assurance Fox News will say your crazy idea about the Earth's core being an icy ball is true. Follow your heart. Listen to the voices no one else can hear. Team up with Conspirowin.
So Deviant's been dropping links in chat. How devious. And apparently this is a thing called a nilometer. I'm not sure how that works or why that works, but I see people talking about it. The nilometer was notches made in the wall. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Where the hell's the next part? And then I think I'm missing a part. I think I'm missing the rest of that comment, because then we just go to the nilometer at elephantine, which is this. It's the collage. So yeah. And then there's other nilometers around, but what is a nilometer? What does it do? How do they work? It looks fascinating though, doesn't it? Like, let me bigify here. It's notches in walls that like line up. I don't know why I'm mousing over this thing, but like, I don't know how this works for timekeeping. Possibly the movement of the sun, possibly the shadows, like for like which day of the year. I don't know, but it looks intriguing how it's like this pathway with notches that has something to do with time, the path of time, the valley of the shadow of time or something. I don't know. I just work here. Okay. We have another thingy. This is from MDPI, which is a place where. Why are we way the hell down here? I don't know. It's old journal articles sometimes get deposited here. So yeah, this one is from May of 2023. It was. Where the hell was it originally published? I don't fucking know. I can't remember. Maybe it says up here, Journals Meteorology, Volume 3. So I guess a journal of meteorology? I don't know. Abstract. Time and frequency are quantities that have been seen a proliferation. I cannot read on my screen, folks. It is awful. The pixels are so small. Like, I cannot tell whether this, at 100%, whether this letter is an S or a B. Like, they're identical at normal viewing size. I can't distinguish them. That's how bad this monitor is. We're doing our best, though. Time and frequency are quantities that have seen a proliferation and diffusion of tools unimaginable until a few decades ago, and whose application implications, are multiplying in a digital society now characterized by an absolute lack of temporal and spatial limits. Well, that's just not true. Like we do we do have, like, we only have so much space we can get to. We can send like rockets and shit into space, but we can only access so much. Oh my goodness. I'm not liking this outfit. I don't know. I thought I'd like it this morning, but I'm just not. I feel weird and puffy. I don't know. Things are weird. Deviant says, damn it, YouTube. YouTube black screened and stole the answer. YouTube is trying to hide the truth about nilometers. However, I could Google it myself. I could. I just. Say la vie. let's see what else have we got here going on. Okay, let's go over here. A brief history of time measurement. Maybe we can get to the truth, the underlying basis of how the way we're measuring time shapes our history. Like we have bits and pieces, like how mechanical clocks gave us the ability to be precise enough that the railroads became a thing. I mean, also telegraphs. You could have a central timekeeper send a signal outward thanks to telegraphs, and eventually radio, which is actually what we do now, is we send a signal through radio. It's often cellular, but whatever. But how did the old ways of keeping time shape the lives and societies of the people who were in them? Okay. Deviant says, the article you read said the Egyptians used a clepsydra, a water clock, to mark the flooding of the Nile, but they didn't. They used a nilometer. Oh, the images show different nilometers. It's not a nilometer, it's a nilometer, because the river is the Nile. Duh. It's one of my more off days, folks. I have to admit. I'm doing my best here, but it's not. Yeah. Nilometer makes sense. As the Nile gets higher and higher, it's going to go higher on the markers, and you can keep track based on the markers. You don't even need a timekeeping device. You just measure the damn river. We can just do that. We used to do that with tides. Before we really figured out how to predict tides, they'd keep like a hermit or a boy or something who would go out into the harbor, and he'd use a stick or a rope or something to see whether the tide was in or not. Now, often you could just look if you were experienced, but many large cities still had someone officially measure it, so they could say, aha, the tide is on its way out. This is the best time for ships to depart, because then they can go out with the tide and borrow some of its momentum. It makes it easier. So yeah. Deviant says, we all have off days. Sometimes we have off months, even off years. Tell me about it. Yeah. Okay. Brief history of time measurement. Ever since humans first noticed. Now, this is an interesting concept. Tides. Tides are a mechanical, physical thing that happens in the real world. But they're also, are they dependent on time, or are we measuring time based on them? Right? Like we sail with the evening tide. So that's like a time. That's a thing. So whatever. It could go either way, depending on your concept. But if you're in a sailing city, if you're in an ocean-going city, if you're in a fishing city, the most important measure of your day isn't dawn and dusk. It's the tides. Right? So that method as a means of timekeeping, every bit of timekeeping is just measuring natural phenomena that happen anyway. Doing it by tides, it shapes your civilization, so to speak. And in some ways, that's part of the mystery of sailor culture, I suppose. The old fishermen's ways with the lighthouses and the sailing ships and so forth. Because they had this whole other system of keeping track of time that was completely distinct from dawn and dusk. I mean, you still delight the lighthouses at dusk, but, you know. Anyway, ever since humans first noticed the regular movement of the sun and the stars, we have wondered about the passage of time. Prehistoric people first recorded the phases of the moon some 30,000 years ago, probably quite a bit sooner, TBH. It may not have shown up on a painting or something, but pretty sure the most ancient humans noticed that sometimes the moon was big and sometimes the moon was small. And it doesn't take many times noticing that to figure out it makes a repeatable pattern. Like, you can figure that out in a single human's lifetime. Not even a sizable fraction of it. Anyway, recording time has been a way by which humanity has observed the heavens and represented the progress of civilization. Kind of both? Kind of either? Kind of neither? It's kind of a thing. I don't know. I hope I didn't scare Dr. Kip away with the conspiracy theory thing. It's most unfortunate. I hope honestly, I hope I didn't scare anybody away with various things I do that don't always necessarily follow or make sense. At least I don't know. I'm having a rough time, folks. But most of you already know that. Some days are better than others. Oh, okay. Kip says, what? I wasn't paying attention. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, prehistoric people first recorded the moon 30,000 years ago. Yeah, we did that already. All right. The earliest natural events to be recognized were in the heavens. But during the course of the year, there were many other events that indicated significant changes in the environment. Seasonal winds and rains, the flooding of rivers like the Nile, the flowering of trees and plants being kind of critical to agriculture, yes, and the breeding cycles and migration of animals and birds all led to natural divisions of the year, and further observation of local customs led to the recognition of the seasons. I dare say you only have to live through 2 winters before you realize seasons are a thing. Like the first winter, maybe the gods are mad at you. Maybe you didn't sacrifice enough sheep. But the second winter, okay, this is a thing that happens every year. You know? Like, it doesn't take that long to figure out seasons. Whatever. I do wonder how many people traveled through snowy regions during the winter and were like, oh, this is a horrible snowy region. And it never occurred to them that a different time of year, the snow melts and it's actually quite pleasant. Like, how many times was a large portion of North America just passed over by First Nations people because it was too snowy when they happened to be passing through? You know, it's things I wonder about because I am a silly being. Say, Levy. Yeah. You need to understand some of these cycles to make agriculture possible. You need to understand breeding, for example, reproduction in order to do the livestock thing. You need to understand the flowering of plants and other forms of plant reproduction in order to grow them on purpose and harvest them and so forth. So measuring time by the sun, the moon, the stars, all different clocks. That's actually another really good clock. Is the sun is daily. The moon is monthly-ish, and the constellations take an annual cycle, you might say. You know, like I know it's heading towards autumn when I start seeing Orion rising after sunset. I can speak words, I promise. Oh my goodness. I'm so bad at this today. As the sun moves across the sky, shadows change in direction and length, and so a simple sundial can measure the length of a day. It was quickly noticed that the length of a day varies at different times of the year. Right, like our first sundials weren't proper sundials. They would be like posts in the middle of town, and people would notice the shadow moving across the ground. And small children would come along and be like, okay, this is morning time. And they'd draw a line, and then they'd watch the shadow move. And then they'd say, okay, this is high sun. And they'd draw a line. And then they'd watch the shadow move. And okay, this is dinner time. And they'd draw a line. And now you have a very basic sundial in the middle of your town. Morning, noon, dinner time. You know, the 3 genders. Every child could do this. It's just a matter of formalizing it and saying, okay, this sundial accounts for the different ways the shadow moves, how sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter, so that we can get precise measures of time using the sun's shadow. That's all a sundial is. It's a formalization of what has always been there. Like a tree. You can do it with a tree or a cow. Behold the cow, its shadow has grown long. The evening approaches. The reason for the difference were not discovered until astronomers accepted the fact that the Earth travels around the sun in an elliptical orbit, and that the Earth's axis is tilted at about 26 degrees. This variation from a circular orbit leads to the equation of time. The equation of time. Oh, goodness. That sounds so official. So we need to see note 2 below, which allows us to work out the difference between clock time and sundial time. Another discovery was that sundials had to be specially made for different latitudes because the sun's altitude in the sky decreases at higher latitudes, introducing longer shadows than at lower latitudes. Today, artists and astronomers find many ways of creating modern sundials. And we have a few depictions. They're quite lovely, I suppose. This a wall sundial? Interesting. I'm not sure how the hell that would work, but it looks interesting. Anyway, the oldest image of a star pattern, Orion, we see here. The 3 stars of Orion's belt and the red star of his right arm. That's Betelgeuse. It's a red giant. It's his right shoulder, and it's so red. Like most stars are whitish, even the red ones. The fact Betelgeuse is red even when the other stars are blue. Holy shit. Also, worth noting this area around Orion's peepee, his scabbard, the Puritans like to say, it's where he keeps his weapon. They got that part right. Now, remember, in the depiction, the constellation itself, he already has 2 weapons, and they're not swords that go into That's his sword, all right. Anyway, there's a big old nebula there that turns the sky pinkish purple, so that's why the stars there are a less blue color. But Betelgeuse, big red giant. I know, different topic, but y'all know how I am with astronomy and astrophysics. It's kind of my favorite thing, so I do get distracted by it easily. Anyway, prehistoric carvings said to represent the Orion constellation. Now this, maybe, but I don't see it, right? Like, we know Orion is the name given to the constellation that already existed, right? Like the stars already exist, but it's humans who played connect the dots and said that's a shape, that's a being, that's a thing. The Greeks called it Orion, but it was already known by cultures before the Greeks even had written language. That's why other cultures are aware of that particular constellation. It precedes Greek assignment of things, the zodiac as we understand it today. But the fact that this carving coincidentally bears some similarity to Orion. Like, for example, Orion has no head in the constellation. There's no visible head. It's just kind of assumed, whereas this figure has a head. Was there another star that's since gone out? Or is the person who discovered this jumping to conclusions? Now, maybe there's... Sapphire Light says Orion's scabbard. Transmask Orion confirmed. Oh, I'm tickled. I love that. New canon unlocked. My goodness. All right, so it says the actual description. That's why I was skeptical, but let's see what it has to say. The oldest image of a star pattern, the constellation of Orion, has been recognized on a piece of mammoth tusk, some 32,500 years old. The constellation Orion is symbolized by a man standing with his right arm raised and a sword at his belt. A sword at his belt. 32,000 years ago, a sword at his belt. When was the sword invented? Swords were invented around 3300 BCE. Now, granted, that's the AI overview, but Wikipedia says swords were invented around 1600 BC. Well, the earliest specimens date from 1600 BCE. The first swords appeared in the Bronze Age as an evolution of a dagger. The earliest dated from the 3rd millennium BCE. Arms and armor. Surviving swords of this type have been dated to approximately 5,000 years ago. Warfare history, 5,000 years ago. Which nation first invented the sword? Around 3300 BCE. TLDR, that ain't a sword if it's 32,000 years old. Just saying. not a sword. The constellation Orion is symbolized by a man standing with his right arm raised and a sword at his belt, and can be seen throughout the world at different times of year. Orion was the sun god of the Egyptians and Phoenicians, and called the Strong One by the Arabs. In parts of Africa, is that true? I thought Orion was a Greek hero. I mean, you could be a Greek hero and a sun god in Egypt, but I don't think that's what the sun god in Egypt was called. I thought it was called Ra, but maybe Amon-Ra and Orion are sort of the same thing. Was Orion a god? Orion is primarily a giant huntsman in Greek mythology, a demigod, a son of Poseidon, but not a major Olympian god. He was powerful and later elevated to the stars, becoming associated with deities and seen as a hero or hunter god in various cultures like the Babylonian, the Egyptian, Osiris. Okay, the Egyptians, it was not Orion. The same configuration of stars was identified as Osiris. Kind of important. Just because it's the same stars doesn't mean it's the same legend. Holy shit. Continuing on. In parts of Africa, his belt and sword are known as 3 dogs chasing 3 pigs. Fair enough. I mean, the color kind of, yeah. And the Borana people of East Africa based a sophisticated calendar on observations of star clusters near Orion's belt. Orion contains some of the brightest stars in the southern part of the winter sky in the northern hemisphere. That's awfully specific, and can be seen later in the southern hemisphere. Well, that's interesting, because Orion, it isn't a proper zodiac constellation, but it's close to the plane of the ecliptic. Yeah, I think you could see it in the southern hemisphere at some times of year. That's pretty neat, TBH. So that leads us to a whole other thing, which I think will also be a fascinating, interesting topic for future discussion. How the ways we perceive the constellations, the space around us, the legends that we project into the heavens shape the world we build. What we see changes how we are after a fashion. It's sort of like the way our stories shape our culture, which shapes our future, but with stars. I'll think of a better way to put that for the time being. But for today, thank you all so much for joining. We are at time for today. We're actually slightly over our normal 90 minutes. But I do want to thank Lil of All Trades for Super Chat earlier, $5. Thank you, Lil. And she says, but you should ring the bells, like, subscribe, and share. And that's good advice for everybody. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining, as always. Remember, you don't have to justify your time to have a good time, to spend some time however the hell you want. And thank you for spending some of it with us. It means a lot to me. We'll see you tomorrow, and possibly sooner if a bonus show happens. But probably for sure tomorrow, probably. You never know what tomorrow brings. Something, because you were better than religion. Mwah. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for December. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkison, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, The Mighty Filbert, Secular Feelinist, and Geo Sam. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember, or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark.